You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendall and Carl Dummler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dummler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendall, and we have great guest today, AJ Schulte, joining us as well. Gentlemen, how are you doing this evening?
It's cold. What's new? I mean, I'm gosh darn it every single week. It's unbelievable. We're supposed to get more snow. I'm have that, what is it, seasonal effectiveness disorder or whatever. It's got to be real. I'm so ready for the spring. Gosh darn it.
See, y'all Iowa boys, see, down here in Texas, it's freezing cold down here, but it's a dry cold, so we're fine. Anyways, y'all, I'm having a good day. How are y'all?
I'm good. I'm freezing up here too. I'm in Kansas, actually. Yeah, it's been the coldest winter I've ever experienced. So
I feel like the guy, the Lord Commander, not the Lord Commander, but on the wall, he's like, "You boys don't know cold, but north of the wall, we had to kill the horses, and once we killed the horses, we had to kill each other." And that's about what I'm going to tell my kids when this winter is finally over. So it's just it's been incredible, but luckily I got a lot of tape to grind and draft takes to make. My heart is warm today because I had Terrell Davis just like about 10 of my tweets, so that means I'm making it. But so yeah, it's draft season, so that's keeping me going.
Amen to that. Draft season is the best season.
Like I said, we're excited to welcome you in here, AJ. How about you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work within football and what you write, Twitter, podcasts, all those kind of things, so we can let all of our listeners know you are a man to go follow.
Well, this will be my sixth draft that I've been scouting for. That makes me feel so old that it's 6 drafts since the 2014 one was my first. I've only been on Twitter for about a year, and I write for a company called Dynasty Football Factory. You could find my work over there under the college section because we have a specific draft tab. You can find me on Twitter at AJ Draft Scout. I promised only bring the most fire of takes to your Twitter timeline.
Well, our listeners will love that, that's for sure. So make sure you get over there, follow him at AJ Draft Scout. Again, we appreciate you coming on the show. And also make sure to find us on Twitter. You can follow me at Carl Dummler MHH and, of course, Nick at Nick Kendall MHH. You can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you just subscribe to our show and leave us a rating as we value your input on our show. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. Like we said, we're going to be talking a little bit of the wide receiver position today here with AJ. And the Broncos seem like they're a team that's probably going to be adding at least 1 or 2 weapons to this offensive setup. Probably a tight end. I mean, that's this past combine, they interviewed pretty much every tight end that they could ever get their hands on. And wide receiver-wise, they need a guy that can really get down the field in a hurry. But I wanted to talk a little bit with you just of the guys that are on the Broncos team right now. And let's start with probably the guy, I mean, he's going to be the number 1 receiver unless Emmanuel Sanders gets healthy in a big-time hurry and is back on the field 100%. But Courtland Sutton, he's a guy that I'm sure you scouted last year for the draft, and Broncos took him in the 2nd round. What can you tell us about Courtland Sutton that you really like about him and things you had really big concerns coming into the NFL?
Well, coming into the NFL, I was a little more concerned about his overall refinement because I thought he was a little raw. But in Denver, he's improved, man. He could be a true bona fide monster. I mean, some of the games, he had an excellent game. I think it's towards the end of the season against Cincinnati.
Yes.
He balled out in that game. And I was stunned. I think once he starts to, obviously as he grows into his development, starts to work a little bit better off the line of scrimmage, we could be talking about a star. His athleticism, his height, weight, speed was excellent last year. I think the Denver Broncos got a steal last year with Courtland Sutton.
He was the guy that was creating just headline after headline in the offseason. I mean, people were talking about him mossing people every single week. And granted, it's the offseason, it's practices, what does that translate? But when Case Keenum, before he got a little bit of shell-shocked, he was really making hay. And I do think that Case Keenum really held him back, especially making plays down the field. There are some questions about his route running that he's going to need to refine on underneath, a lot of that stuff, as well as his consistency, because he had a fair amount of drops last year. But I think more than anything, having a guy like Case Keenum and that offense kind of hold him back. We saw the flashes. It just needs to take that next step this year. But as an X in this offense, I'm really excited to see what he has this season.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I wasn't the biggest fan entering the draft last year of him, just because I thought he was such a big project. Because like you said, he was really raw. And for the Broncos, I just didn't think that was exactly what they needed. I love that they paired him then later in the draft with Deshaun Hamilton. Because, I mean, if you're talking about a guy with raw skills and Courtland Sutton, but a guy that could have star potential, Deshaun Hamilton came into the draft, I thought, as one of the most refined wide receivers entering the NFL last season. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Deshaun Hamilton is one of the best route runners I've scouted, period, coming out of college. He was excellent, especially in this season in Denver. Excellent in the short game underneath. I think down the season he got a lot more intermediate and deep looks, and I think you can play him inside or in the slot, and he's going to be great. Those two, you got them day two. I think that's an excellent 1-2 combo. I'm
very excited to see him in the slot this year. I hate to dog on Case Keenum too much because it wasn't all about him, but I didn't feel like Hamilton was a great fit with him because Case Keenum just didn't want to throw over the middle of the field. And that's where Deshaun Hamilton just dominates people. His ability to win in the short area, to get open, to find the hole in zone defenses, all those kind of things. That was one thing that really I think I loved beyond anything else with Deshaun Hamilton was he was great against press, man, or zone. It didn't matter. He had ways to beat them all. And again, just being over the middle, if Case Keenum's not willing to throw over the middle, well, it kind of eliminates him as any kind of weapon for the Broncos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had that film review, Carl, this past offseason showing, hey, here's Hamilton open again. Oh, here he is open again. And there's even some quotes out there, he's out there getting open, doing his job, getting frustrated because he's open, but they're just not looking his way. So hopefully going with Rich Scangarello this offseason, this new offense coming in here, quarterback that's honestly a little bit better in the quick pass game. At least he was this past season for Flacco, which seems counterintuitive with the big arm guy, but had Derek Klassen on here, and he made that big point multiple times saying, over the middle passing should improve just because of his ability with the easier reads with Scangarello offense and the arm talent to zip it in there more than Case Keenum, who's more of a timing kind of guy. So really excited about Hamilton this season, and a guy that AJ doesn't know as much about because he wasn't a drafted guy, but Tim Patrick's another one that Ben Albright's been on here. He's mentioned that Tim Patrick is a guy you got to look out for, and I know, Carl, you've done some work on Tim Patrick, that he's another guy. People talk about Courtland Sutton, they talk about Deshaun Hamilton, but Tim Patrick's another one that a lot of people are really excited about in Dove Valley.
Yeah, I would say he's underrated considering very few people know much about this guy outside of Denver, but at the same time, I still think he has some limitations to his game where he's not a great route runner. He's 6'5", 220, and he's got some speed to him. I think he ran like a 4.45 40 or something like that. And so he's got a little bit of that long speed to him, and he can win over the top. He can out jump people. He does really good on the comeback routes, the out routes, those kind of things along the sideline. I just wish I would see a little bit more of his ability to threaten the middle of the field, so that corners really had to respect that part. But for a third guy on the receiver core, he's not a bad option for the Broncos.
Or even like a fourth and fifth, kind of rotational player, a guy with that height, weight, and speed. That's not bad to have as kind of a depth guy
Yeah, absolutely. And to reiterate that point, yeah, I've heard this multiple times. Not sure where it originated from, but it's really stuck with me, is that you want to build a wide receiver core, kind of like a basketball team. You know, you got your guys that are the rebounders, the size dudes that can go up and play above the rim, you know, Cortland Sutton. You got your quick slasher types that can get open quickly, and that's theoretically Hamilton, more of the ball handler type. And then you kind of got your slashers, the long court speed guys, kind of like a Tim Patrick. But what the Broncos really need now is potentially some dynamic guys with the ball in their hands and some burners. And there's been multiple reports out there that the Broncos are looking to bring in some burners. Now, that can mean a multitude of things. You know, there's the guys who can run those 9 routes, to beat the press, make plays down the field like the Deshaun Jacksons of the world. There are the burners that are kind of like more like the Tavon Austins, where they are the gadget types, where they have speed, but it's not so much as a route runner, but it's after getting the ball in their hands that they make plays. So we're going to actually look into this draft here. That's why we got AJ on here today. Talk a lot about these burners, not so much the X guys. You know, we're not going to talk DK Metcalf. We're not going to talk Butler from Iowa State because, I mean, it's Iowa State, the inferior school to Iowa, obviously. and we're not going to talk about, you know, Kelvin Harmon, so to speak, but a lot of these other wide receivers, and this wide receiver class has got me giddy. I'm really excited to talk about a lot of these guys, and that's why we got AJ on here today. So before we get to that, though, we're going to take a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All righty. Well, welcome back. We are excited to talk with AJ today about the wide receivers in this class. Not all of them, but this is such a deep class. Hopefully this episode doesn't run too long, but there's so many different guys we want to talk about. And the first one's bringing it back here. We got our factors here. We got our Trump trait cards. We got our talking points, but number one guy that I've been standing on the block for him for a little bit. You know, his hand's concerning, but a guy that I've seen a lot of tape of just because the Broncos have a lot of interest in this quarterback, reportedly, and that is Emmanuel Hall from Missouri, who is a guy that, I mean, put it lightly, he made himself some serious money at the NFL Combine this past week. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, his combine. I knew going in how explosive of a player he was and how dynamic he was, but having a broad jump and explosiveness drills as crazy as his was, I think he was like in the 98th to 99th percentile for both jumps.
He was almost at the record for the broad jump, I believe. Which
is just insane for a guy at 6 foot. But I'm a fan of Emmanuel Hall's tape. I think you could make an argument he's a top 5 wide receiver in this class. Like you were saying, his hands and his durability, I think, are the two biggest things that are against him right now. But if you turn on the tape, his Florida game, I thought was one that was a huge standout on tape. I think he only had 4 or 5 catches in that game because Missouri's offense, for some reason, never really liked throwing the ball unless it was wide open deep, which Hall was most of the time. But he had a couple catches deep and one on a deep out route where he just toasted that poor corner. And it was I dropped my phone and was like, I'm done. I don't need to watch anymore. I'm sold on this kid. His releases off the line of scrimmage are just a thing of beauty. It's poetry sometimes. Overall, I think he can provide a really nice skill set, but as a player comp, I am worried about the hands and durability, which makes me kind of think that he's Will Fuller.
Hey, man, Will Fuller, first-round pick, a guy that when he is healthy, his ability deep, I mean, it completely changes how that offense can look. But you're right with those concerns about his hands and his durability. I kind of wondered about him maybe in a Ted Ginn role, but I think he does have the ability to be a bit more nuanced, so to speak.
Yes.
We do have them. We have these wide receivers here categorized. We got the Z burners, we got the slot and Z hybrids, we got the gadget types, and we got the pure slots. And we're getting into the Z burners. So Emmanuel Hall, I mean, if you're looking for a guy that can win deep, he was the bread and butter for that offense at Missouri. I mean, you got Albert Okwuegbunam, I'm pronouncing that wrong for sure, the 6'8" monster tight end that didn't come out. I'm surprised he didn't come out. How good would this tight end class be if he would have come out too? But right. Man, Emmanuel Hall, great year. He does have a sports hernia, which kept him from doing the shuttle and the 3-cone at the combine, reportedly, and it's something that he is going to need surgery on. And Bronco fans, if you're listening right now, yes, Troy Fumagalli missed all of last season because of the hernia surgery that he had. So that is a red flag. It could cost him his entire rookie season. It's totally possible. But, I mean, a guy that some people were saying is a potential day 3 pick after those combines, explosive drills, with a sports hernia at that, with a sports hernia, running the jumping like he did, the 40-yard dash, which is 4.39 seconds. I mean, there's a lot to work with here. I am curious about his route running. I don't know if you guys saw this on Twitter, but somebody asked him to draw his favorite route at Missouri, and he literally just drew a straight line and then the other line going to it from Drew Lock.
Hey,
so
I can't blame the guy. I mean, if that's what he wins the most and that's what he loves to do, I completely support that decision to do that. But I do agree that there is a little bit of lack of, I guess, complicated route running within his arsenal. So especially that rookie year, he's going to be very limited as a player. You know, if he's coming on the field, there's a very good chance he's going deep. I mean, that's going to be – there's about 3 routes that he's going to run other than – I mean, he's going to run a couple shorter ones here and there. They'll probably do a few swing passes to him here and there too. But he will be a little bit limited. And then you throw in the injury. How much is he going to get much of an off season? So there are some red flags going up there with this kind of guy. But it's I mean, he opens up an offense for sure. Everybody has to respect that speed, those long arms, be able to catch passes even in traffic. I mean, he's one of those guys that I definitely would be pounding the table for.
The good news is if you draft Drew Lock, like a lot of people are saying, you have that chemistry. And if you stick with Joe Flacco, it's an automatic defensive pass interference down the field. So it should be good.
Boom.
Absolutely. One thing I do want to ask about him is your thoughts on him playing not only the Z, but the slot. Is that something you can foresee in his future? You know, he's not a gigantic guy, and he does show some quickness, some explosiveness in that lower body. And, you know, like the Kyle Shanahan, again, we had Derek Klassen on here and Mark Schofield talking a lot of Kyle Shanahan, West Coast offense principles, that variant. And they love to use those guys that are just pure track stars from that slot position, you know, Marquise Goodwin, Taylor Gabriel, a guy that against cover 3 defenses and cover 2, they're threatening that seam instantly. Is that something you foresee Emmanuel Hall being able to do at the next level, or is his route running deficiencies and ability in the short game just not there yet that you don't really see him outside of that Z spot right now?
But I think he could if you asked him to. I don't recall him playing a lot in the slot in Missouri. I think they mainly stuck him outside. But the route running, I think, was more a product of the scheme, more so than his lack of ability, because that kind of athleticism and explosiveness, I'd say once he starts to develop, you could put him there. But to start off with, why not just play him what he's good at? Yeah. You know, let him run your 3 routes down the field. He's good at it. And the kid's fast.
I would say he's, even later on in his career, I would say he's going to be more of maybe just a partial guy in the slot. I don't see him ever being there full time. Yeah. I just don't think he has the body build to handle that kind of workload there in the slot.
Yeah, and with the injury histories as well, a guy that, you know, the slot, you're going to be taking more hits from bigger guys. That's got to be a question. But again, Kyle Shanahan, he loves to have those speed guys there, and you got Goodwin, who's, you know, not necessarily a pure slot by any means. When they drafted, oh gosh, who was the other Louisiana Tech wide receiver that they took? It was Carlos Henderson and Trent something. Taylor? Yes, Trent Taylor. You know, that more prototypical Patriot-style tight end, the short, quick guy. Yeah. So there is some variations of the offense where they use that speed slot guy like Marquise Goodwin. So definitely something to look out for here, and something else to really point out. People like to point out how Drew Lock struggled against teams like Georgia and Alabama. Well, guess who was not playing in those games? Emmanuel Hall. It was crazy to see Missouri's record this past year with Emmanuel Hall compared without him. I think they only lost 1 game in the entire season when Emmanuel Hall was playing. So I don't know if that speaks more to Emmanuel Hall's ability or Drew Lock's ability relying on that deep threat. You know, something definitely kind of bringing me back to Hackenberg concerns. Hackenberg, you know, put up some good numbers first year, second year. Well, it turned out that he had a guy named Allen Robinson that he was just chucking it up to that was making amazing plays left and right at Penn State. So definitely something to, you know, is it the chicken or the egg? I guess we'll find out soon enough. Hopefully one way or the other it'll work out for the Broncos. But another guy that has been really impressive, another Z-burner type with good speed, another combine standout as well. Not to the extent that Emmanuel Hall was, but still a guy who's done very well, and one of the Senior Bowl standouts as well. Terry McLaurin, guy that never really totally stood out at Ohio State. The offense is more of the we're going to pretty much score whatever we want anyway because we're more talented than almost every team we go up against. Maybe except for Oklahoma a couple times. I'll give you that, AJ. I'm a Big Ten guy, but I'll give you that one. He's a Texas guy, Oklahoma fan. What are you going to do? But Terry McLaurin, Ohio State, good size, had a solid combine, 6 foot, 210 pounds, ran the 4.35 40, pretty good verticals, et cetera, broad jump, et cetera, et cetera. Strong guy as well. I really love that he brings tenacity as a blocker and tenacity as a special teamer. But you know what? You're not drafting him in the top 100 picks for his special teams play. That's kind of what the Broncos got with Cody Latimer, and it didn't work out the best. So I'm curious about your thoughts on Terry McLaurin playing this Z-burner role for the Broncos.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about McLaurin is there were a couple times where after I saw his 4.35, I was like, where in the world did that come from? Then I went and rewatched him, and I was like, okay, in that short to intermediate area where he's at his best, the kid is ridiculous. I concerned about the long speed, which makes me kind of wonder about the Z burner role. But with the 4.35 40, that kind of makes my point a little moot. So I think at the next level, you almost have to get him in the open field with a lot of manufactured touches, run some drags, run some screens to let him fully utilize, because I wasn't sold on his route running or explosiveness that much. And I think if you can get a guy with his athleticism in the open field, it's a lot better than having him go deep like you would Emmanuel Hall.
Yeah, for sure. I would say Hall is a more natural, explosive, deep threat, but I think Terry McLaurin brings a power element that you don't see with Emmanuel Hall, so to speak, just a physicality.
Yeah, I would say his kind of skill set wasn't well utilized there at Ohio State. I mean, because of that kind of speed that he has, the ability that he has cutting over the middle and some things like that. Even there, I mean, some of his footwork he's got to clean up. I just don't think they taught him well. Is one thing I would say there at Ohio State.
Yeah,
I wasn't very impressed with some of the things that they were having him do, and I think in a lot of other programs he could have been a lot more successful and a lot more NFL ready. And so there again, I mean, some of these guys, you're looking at them and saying, how much are they going to really help in year one? For me, Emmanuel Hall, if the injury is good, he's at least a deep ball threat. I mean, you're talking about that trump card. He's at least got that. Yeah. So day one, he's going to be a contributor. Terry McLaurin, I'm just not sure how much he really brings more than maybe 20, 30 catches year one.
Besides special teams.
Right.
Yeah. Special teams will be where he makes his mark early on.
Just like he did at Ohio State. I mean, I think it was a 2 or 3 year captain there, but he was a guy that was a little bit lower on my radar. But then at the Senior Bowl, he's one that kept showing out and showing out. I mean, probably one of the top 3 performers at wide receiver at the Senior Bowl by most accounts. So I'm interested by him. I do think that the deep speed is there. I think he was one of the top 5 yards per catch guys in college football this past season. I was looking for it just now. Don't quote me on that, but I know it was very high.
20 yards per catch.
Yeah. So, and I did see him, and who was the other wide receiver for Ohio State? They didn't declare. He was another big play guy for him. KJ Hill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's KJ Hill, yeah.
Both those guys. Plays down the field. So I really do like Terry McLaurin. Also, by all accounts, a phenomenal person, a guy who's very retrospective, intelligent, and dynamic personality. So that's always, makes him rise on my board a little bit, because as the more I get away from just pure tape analysis and talking with team sources and whatnot, the more I become a character guy, as cliche and coach talk as that is. Character matters in the locker room. So I do like Terry McLaurin. I am curious though, AJ, what are your thoughts about his trump card trait?
Well, I think his trump card would be kind of his well-rounded skill set, and the fact that he doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, and I think he provides that value, but I don't know how much. You know, like he's kind of like a jack of all trades, and that's a good thing for him, but also a bad thing because he doesn't stand out in a certain trait, but he has a lot of good ones.
Yeah, and I do want to bring up also, how much do you think this Ohio State offense limited his production? I mean, obviously a classic example is Michael Thomas. You know, they're not a one-for-one comparison. Michael Thomas is a much more nuanced receiver. I would say probably a more quick guy based on these measurements here at the Combine. You know, the three-cone wasn't elite for Terry McLaurin. Granted, he's a thicker guy, more down-the-field ability. But how much of that Ohio State offense do you think really just shuttered his potential?
Well, it's hard to produce a lot when you're in an offense that has 7 draftable guys and Paris Campbell running a lot of the stuff that Terry McLaurin would normally succeed at. You know, the underneath stuff, they were like, we're just going to hand it to this guy with a 4.31 speed because he's faster than you. But I don't know, because his route running, I don't feel like any Ohio State guy has matched Michael Thomas. And so I do wonder about going forward, how much does that impact his value if a team's going to go, well, your route running was kind of suspect and you weren't a super great catcher. So what are they teaching at Ohio State?
They're teaching him to block.
Yeah.
Honestly, like he kicks butt as, again, plays into special teams again. But I mean, his ability as a blocker, he definitely is somebody who, when the tape comes out after the game, he's looking for his blocks because he put somebody on his butt. But other than that, yeah, I mean, you're right. You know, get open and give the ball to the dudes in space. It's worked pretty well for Ohio State so far. How nuanced is it? I guess we're going to find out here with Day taking over for Urban Meyer. But I did like a lot what I see. Is he a top 100 pick, though?
In this wide receiver class? Nah.
Probably not.
I wouldn't take him top 100.
I mean, unless every top speed guy is off the board, or you're just looking for that key special teams guy, then by all means go for it. But I don't even, if it's late, I don't even know if I'd take him over a project, just because he's more of like okay, I know what I'm going to get, but it's not really super exciting me that much.
All right, we'll talk about a guy that we were talking about just a little bit today. I talked about him with Mark Schofield a little bit last week too. A guy that's excited me, that's really stood out when I watched tape, that I brought it up with Carl last week as well. We were doing some predictions about who's some under-the-radar athletic standouts. Darius Slayton from Auburn. And, he's a guy that I think the inconsistencies of the vertical passing with Jarrett Stidham this past year kind of held him back, but my goodness, we're talking about Emmanuel Hall having a really good testing day. Darius Slayton was right up there with him, 6'1", 190 pounds, but it was really these athletic measurements where he stood out. A 4.39 40-yard dash, which is obviously very good. 40.5-inch vertical, 135-inch broad jump, which was the second best. Whew. Yeah, talk about some explosiveness in that lower half. And a guy that, some of these comparisons on Mock Draft School, number one for him, Emmanuel Hall, the number one comparison. Again, very similar tester. Paris Campbell's up there. DJ Chark is a name. Justin Hunter, Josh Doxson. So curious about your thoughts. He's a guy that you hadn't done as much work on, but getting into him now and after seeing some of this testing, he's a guy that I think, man, there are so many good testers of the wide receiver. He's not getting the talk that he should be, but I was really impressed with how he did at the Combine.
Yeah, the first game that I threw on was, I'd found, I was like, you know what? I'm going to find, if I'm kind of rushing to watch this guy, I'm going to find a couple of the best teams that he played. And the first game that I watched was LSU. And there was one rep. Oh gosh, where was he? Was on, I think they were backed up against their end zone. And he just made mincemeat of Greedy Williams on a comeback route. And I was just like, holy smokes, how did I not see this guy before when I was watching Jarrett Stidham? Because it's like every time you watch him now, he's just exploding. And I was blown away because nobody had talked about him. Nobody is talking about him. But with his testing and the stuff that you see on tape, whew, man, sign me up for a 3rd or 4th round guy right here.
Yeah, especially that Z burner role. Like, I think he covers ground. It's just so smooth. And it's not even that he's a long starter. He's sudden as well, but with his ability to get to that second gear, it just looks so natural for him. So I wish Jarrett Stidham would have been a little bit more consistent this past year throwing it deep, because I think Slayton could have put up some serious numbers.
I'm going to run with an OU kind of guy here. He reminds me a lot of Kenny Stills in that deep threat role. Kenny Stills is a super burner. I think, in my personal opinion, Kenny Stills is one of the better deep threats in the NFL. And the fact that he plays with Tannehill and had Jay Cutler as his quarterbacks doesn't help his situation. But there's a lot of similarities between the two. They've got that excellent natural and, as you were saying, smooth gear to accelerate downfield.
Yeah. And that 4.39 doesn't hurt.
Here's 3 things about him for me that really stick out. That hand size, 10 inches. This man, I love the way that he catches the football. He has it away from his body. He's not that body catcher. You see a lot of burners that want to be a body catcher, and it just really limits their ability. They might have 2 yards on somebody, but they're still waiting for the ball to come into their body instead of trying to go up and actually get it. And so I love that he goes up and gets it. I love that he knows he's very nuanced in his comeback routes. That's something that really stuck out with me. If he knows when he gets to that top speed and all of a sudden he sees that corner flip their hips, he hits that top of the route and boom, comes back and just has a very comfortable place for the quarterback to throw the football. And if you're a burner, there's 2 things you got to be good at, is not only just the ability to go over the top, but the ability to run that comeback route, because that's your counter to it, where everybody's afraid of you going deep. So all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to stop short, come back 10 yards. And I think he has a little bit more ability to win over the middle than a lot of these other guys. He just looks a lot stronger in his ability to hold on to the football. And I don't know, there's just something more that sticks out about him compared to some of the other guys. I think he has a more, well-rounded game where I could get really behind that this guy can turn into something more than just a burner.
A more natural receiver is what you're...
Oh, yeah, exactly.
There's like a suddenness, too, that he generates out of his breaks, especially lateral breaking routes, and just leaves the cornerbacks behind him. And his ability to cover ground quickly and win on vertical routes with also some jumping ability to top it all off. Man, I wish he was a little bit thicker, I guess, the way to put it. 6'1", 190, which is maybe 205, 22nd percentile with that 190 speed. But again, down the field, DJ Chark maybe a Josh Jackson type. If those guys have niches. Are they first-round talents? No, but they have value, and that's something that the Broncos really need from that Z position. They don't have anybody else like that right now. So I'm very, very much intrigued by Darius Slayton, and to see him test the way he did, I would like to say that I was surprised about the leaping ability, but the speed and everything else, man, very, very good feelings about him there. A guy that really shocked me, though, is Miles Boykin from Notre Dame. I think I'm definitely not alone in that statement. There is literally nobody talking about this guy coming out of, heading into the combine. I mean, even the big Notre Dame homers were not talking about him super high. And looking at his spider graph here, I mean, everybody's talking about DK Metcalf, rightfully so. I mean, guys that big, running that fast, jumping that high. What a freak. But Miles Boykin put up pretty darn similar athletic testing, but with better agilities. 6'4", 220 pounds, a wingspan of 81.5 inches, the arm length of 33.5 inches, solid hand size of 4'4", 240, and then the jumps, 43.5 vertical, 140 broad jump, and then again, a solid 3-cone and 20-yard shuttle, 77th percentile and 86th percentile. I mean, this guy put up numbers that I was not expecting. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Absolutely freaky numbers, and made me go back to the tape, and I didn't quite see that level of those traits, I guess, as much on tape. And I'm curious about your thoughts about his usage and his overall tape while at Notre Dame this past year, which is not, again, that's a playoff school, not a low-profile program by any means.
Yeah, what's crazy is that on tape, you'd think he has a ball and chains around his feet because he doesn't test like this. I mean, if you look back at his tape, and you see the way that his vertical jump is, you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But all this explosiveness, you don't see a lot of that. And, you look at his chart and all this 98th and 99th percentile, and I was like, where did this come from? Because on tape, he's a jump ball master. He has got outstanding ball control. But this, explosiveness, I didn't see any of that on tape. So I'm kind of going, is he a workout warrior or was he misused at Notre Dame? Because Equinemius St. Brown last year was also incredibly misused at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But he had Brandon Wimbush as his quarterback. So how much of that varies with the two different quarterbacks, how much of that varies with your scheme. All I know is that he made himself a butt ton of money at the combine. If he follows it up at his pro day, phew, my goodness.
Go ahead, Carl.
Personally, I think he's a workout warrior. If I'm gonna go off of the tape, because there's so many times if you're talking about that kind of athleticism that he showed at the combine, he got caught from behind a lot.
Yes.
I mean, he had a lot of guys on the defense running faster than him. I didn't see a lot of plays where he was getting a ton of separation. You just don't see that athleticism. And so I just feel he's one of those guys that in shorts, man, he looks like Superman. On the field, he still has a skill set. I'm not trying to take away from that, but I don't think he's going to be that guy that's always winning over the top for you. I think he's more going to be a red zone threat. I would put more into that than I would his ability to win downfield.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And it does beg the question, and watching him do his drills, the gauntlet, whatnot, compared to his Notre Dame tape, did he lose weight? Because at Notre Dame, he looked to me, he looked much more, I don't want to say pudgy, but he looked like he had a little bit more of a donk on him. So I'm curious if he's at a more functional NFL weight now, and potentially the mass he had on him before was holding back some of these athletic upsides that, I mean, now he's 220. I bet you he was closer to 230, 235 while at Notre Dame.
That would have been my guess just watching him. I think I watched the Stanford game and a couple more, but the Stanford game, I was expecting him to just blow by guys like Elijah Holder, and he never did. And he's a lot like Josh Doxson in a way that he makes outstanding body control catches, but the rest of it, you're just going, what's going on here, bud? Where was the rest of this?
Yeah, so definitely a guy that the athletic testing makes you go back to the tape. That's one way or another. You don't want to double count these guys. You don't want to be like, oh, this guy's athletic on tape and he's really athletic at the combine. Hey, better double count it. But guys like this where the tape doesn't match up to what they showed at the combine, one way or the other, whether the tape looks super athletic and they don't show it at the combine, or the tape shows they're not super athletic and they show it at the combine, got to send you back. A guy like Brian Cashman, linebacker, Minnesota, hadn't watched much of him, showed up the combine. Wow, the tape's great. So this is another one. Somebody will take him. I'm not sure if he's going to go top 100, but round 4, I mean, before we're talking about a guy who's probably late day 3, the production's not there, even the big program. But now we're talking borderline pushing 100, top 100. We'll see, because this is a very deep wide receiver class, but the athletic traits show a guy that theoretically should win vertically from the Z with some speed, but especially also some jumping ability as well, and a solid agility drills. I mean, it's all there. So really interesting, and I am fascinated to see what he does at the next level. Very likely could be another guy that, to the highlight of his athletic career is the combine. Talk about the spider web. I mean, it happens all the time, but I definitely am intrigued by his ability and what he does at the next level. And as you said, AJ, no doubt in my mind, he made himself some money. Another guy that's he had a pretty solid combine. I mean, a lot of these wide receivers had pretty darn good combines, but kind of like a DK Metcalf as well. The agility drills were not great. The 5th percentile for the 3-cone at 7.32 seconds. I think Anthony Nelson, who's 6'7" and 275 pounds, beat his 3-cone pretty solidly. And that's Gary Jennings, wide receiver from West Virginia, 6'1", 214. So solid size there. Wingspan of 78 1/8. Arm length 32 1/2. Not terrible. Hand size, all of these above the 50% threshold. And then you see these broad jumps, the verticals. I mean, all of it's from 80 percentile to 87th percentile. And the 40-yard dash, 4.42. So a guy, I think, a lot of people made a lot about David Sills at West Virginia. But for me, when I was watching West Virginia, it was Gary Jennings, the guy that was standing out.
Yeah, Jennings to me has always been the better prospect of all the West Virginia guys, outside of maybe Teron Tresco, or Wesco, excuse me. He stood out, but in this year he really took on a new level. You watch the 2017 Greer, he was a lot more underneath, and then in 2018 he did a lot more stuff deep. But my main concern is he's so incredibly raw. I mean, his best tape was the Oklahoma tape, but that's not saying much considering Oklahoma's covered him with a pass rushing linebacker, you know? So how does he do against tight press coverage when a guy puts his hands on him? Because, hey, his best plays came against open air. So like you said, all of his testing was great, but in the scheme at West Virginia, how good is he going to be? Year 1 and even year 2 and 3. There are a lot of guys who are fast. This class, everybody's fast. But he's not nuanced enough. And then you look at that, what do you say, the 5th percentile 3-cone? Or something like that?
Yeah, not great.
Yeah, that makes me kind of go, okay, maybe if he's like my 4th or 5th guy, I'm okay with that. But if you're wanting to play him exclusively outside in that burner role, you're going to ask for him to develop quite a lot more than what he showed at West Virginia.
That's true probably for most of those guys, that air raid system at West Virginia. But again, showed decently, and as a guy who's a pure Z, doesn't have that slot Z ability, in my opinion, from what I've saw, that there's some ability there.
I would say the one thing I like about him compared to some of the other guys we've talked about is his strength. I mean, you can see this guy sometimes is taking 2 or 3 guys, dragging him for an extra couple yards.
It's a ball carried, yeah.
And so, I mean, I do like that ability for him to pick up some extra yards, be a guy that can even run over the middle some. There's just, like you said, that rawness, that inconsistency in what he's bringing on the field. I mean, there's some plays that he makes I'm going, wow, this guy, okay, I need to watch more. And then other times I'm like, I'm not liking what I'm seeing. So it's just, again, for me, if you're talking about those guys that are going to be those 4th or 5th guys, they either have to have something really, really special that they bring to the table or that they bring special teams as well.
Yeah.
And I just don't see that being what this guy brings to the table.
Yeah, it varies on game to game. Like if you watch his Oklahoma tape, well, yeah, you'd be convinced. But you watch games like Texas and a couple other games, you're going, no thanks. I think early on he'd have to prove himself as a special team returner because I think he did recover some punts and kicks, but I never really saw like a standout guy there. But the more you can do, the better, especially coming raw.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those are some of my favorite Z burners, but we still got some speed guys to get to here. Some guys that are a little bit more nuanced, but first we're going to take a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and we're back, and we are going to talk about one of my favorite wide receivers in this entire class. Honestly, my wide receiver, too, for the Denver Broncos, a guy that I think he had a pretty good combine as well. I was surprised his 3-cone wasn't higher than it was, but he looked really well and was if you recall, Carl, he was my actual number 1 winner from the Senior Bowl because just how naturally he looked, and he stopped being held back from that quarterback. Talking about Deebo Samuel from the University of South Carolina. And we have a new category here. It's not just the Z burners. We're looking for that slot Z hybrids. And while Deebo isn't a true burner in that classic sense, I mean, granted, the 4.48 40 is not bad. He's got that ability to play both those positions and be a guy with yak, a guy that can do just so many things. And man, second round, if he's there for the Broncos, I know they don't really need wide receiver, but pairing him with Cortland Sutton would, make me pant a little bit.
See, I'm thinking more Deebo Samuel and Deshaun Hamilton. You have Hamilton in the slot, Samuel on the outside, and those guys running some crossers, some layered routes. I mean, there's just different things you could do with those guys, and their ability to win in the quick area and win off the press. I mean, teams would have so much trouble. That 3rd and 3 play, teams would just be like, we're screwed. I mean, that's what these guys could do on the field. And then Samuel, he offers even more than that he could become that runner for you if you need him to do some end around routes or some end around runs for you. I mean, he brings so much to the table that, yes, he's not the greatest deep ball kind of guy, but because he has such a well-rounded game and he has such nuances to his route running, man, I mean, day one, this guy comes in and teams hate him. teams hate going up against this guy. That's my personal thoughts on him.
Yeah, I think if you're coming from the Kyle Shanahan or the Sean McVay kind of West Coast offense principles with a lot of play action, as a defensive coordinator, you're trying to stop Deebo Samuel. Good luck. I mean, this guy is one of the more explosive guys, I think. I wouldn't say explosive in more of like the explosively fast, like we would say with Emmanuel Hall, but explosive in that short area game. You get him a screen or a drag route or a slant, he's gone. He's going to take it the distance. And you could have so much fun scheming a player like that into your offense. Heck yeah, go for it. You pair this kid with a true X like Cortland Sutton, and then you can kind of interchange him with Deshaun Hamilton. Shoot. I don't care who your quarterback is. That's a fun group of wide receivers.
Yeah, and his just overall game, I feel like he just gets open so suddenly, and he has like a thickness to him as well, where once he gets the ball in his hands, it's like a running back again. So a threat in that way, and he can win deep, but I wouldn't call him so much a burner rather than a guy who can win with just shifting his gears, shifting his stride length, and a versatile player. So I do worry that maybe he is a little bit too similar to Deshaun Hamilton, but I think there's more explosiveness there with Hamilton. But again, a very good compliment, totally different than what you have with a Deshaun Hamilton there. And for my money, a guy that, for the Broncos specifically, my number 2 overall wide receiver. I am curious, what are his like main weaknesses, concerns with his game, keeping him from being obviously a top 10, top 15 kind of guy, and what is his flagship trait that you can put your hat on?
Well, I think my biggest concern coming in was I circled that injury that kept him out in 2017. I think he played, was it even a game? Did he play a full game in 2017?
He played.
I thought he got hurt on like kickoff on like the first or second play of the season.
He played in 3 games.
3 games, okay. That kind of durability to go along, that's some concerns. And he's not, like you were saying, that super explosive fast guy. There's not a whole lot of concerns. You can go, okay, yeah, he can be a little better route runner. He could catch a little better, but there's not a trait that's making me go, okay, this is a huge weakness of his game that he has to improve. I think we've kind of talked about his biggest strength, and that's his playmaking ability. That's once he has the ball in his hands, nobody's going to stop him because he's super fast, he's super agile, and he has a running back mentality in the open field. Once he has the ball, he's not going down unless 3 or 4 guys are taking him with him.
And I would say this last year, he answered some questions about his ability in the red zone. That's something that's kind of stuck out with me, that sometimes these smaller guys, these shorter guys, you don't view them as a red zone threat. But because of his ability to win in short area and because of his strength, I think he becomes a huge asset in that kind of weaponry where teams still have to really worry about anything that guy's going to do, because he could run to the corner, he could run a slant, he could run a screen pass in for a touchdown. I mean, there's just so many things he could do that a quarterback can't know what he's bringing to the table.
Yeah, and I think that, in the red zone, you already have, if we're talking about Denver, you already have that kind of perceived red zone threat with Cortland Sutton, and this, was he 6'4", 220-ish?
Yeah.
And Deebo can kind of give you a little more playmaking design, because if he comes around on motion, the team's going to have to adjust to that. What if that takes a safety off of Sutton? If that safety or even a linebacker or whoever comes across to follow Deebo, you've gotten a guy off coverage. And I just think that value that he brings, because you have to pay attention to him no matter where he is. I love his game. I think he's going to be a star.
Man, high praise there. Now we're going to bring it around to a guy who actually is probably the most explosive wide receiver in this class, at least on tape. Maybe Metcalf would have a run for his money, but talking about Marquise Hollywood Brown, cousin of Antonio Brown from Oklahoma, your school there, AJ, and a guy that, I mean, let's be honest, the Linsfranc injury is going to be a concern. That is going to be a concern until it's not anymore. That's just the nature of that injury. Really can hamper a lot of players, but outside of the realm of that injury, which, again, huge concern. This guy is probably as much of a downfield, smaller Z slot type of threat that you're going to have in this draft class. And I'll be honest, I'm a little bit saddened that we did not get to see him in the athletic testing, the gauntlet and whatnot, because just such an incredibly smooth mover from the wide receiver position.
Yeah, this is from the OU guy. This is going to be weird. But I have absolutely no idea if I would draft him in the top 100 without testing.
Yeah.
And from being an OU fan, everybody's just like, well, you should be pounding the table for Marquise Brown. And I'm going, he's got issues.
Yeah. He does have issues. The ability to come back for the ball, it's not always there. He's kind of a guy who waits for it to get there. And again, he is teeny tiny, which is, I mean, there's no other way to put it than that's a concern for me.
I mean, what did he? I think he measured in at like 5'9", 165 or something like that.
Yeah,
I cannot tell you any player who has become a super duper megastar outside of maybe Tyreek Hill at that size. But even Tyreek Hill's a little thicker than that, and he's not as fast as Tyreek. I think that weight is probably bottom percentile.
It's first percentile.
Is it first? Okay. But like he's such a natural athlete. I think we all know how fast this guy is. I think he probably would have run around there with Paris Campbell at a 4.3. At a 4.3 flat. I mean, and some people were saying he could even hit 4.2s. But with all the concerns of his ability to just catch the football. Early on in the season, he had a great jump ball against, it was either Florida Atlantic or UCLA, where he goes up and he comes back and he snags that thing out of the air on a jump. And I was like, oh, look at that. He's already answered one of my concerns. And then he never did it again the whole season.
Yeah. One of my biggest issues with any receiver going from college to NFL, if they're a body catcher, they're usually not on my board. It limits so much of their range to be able to make an impact on a play. And it's so inconsistent in their ability to actually catch a football. So that's one thing that definitely bothers me about him. So many of his plays are him wide open so he can let the ball get into the body. But in the NFL, when those windows are closing down and he actually has to go and stretch out and actually reach for a football, can he consistently do that? And at least at OU, I didn't see it consistently enough to answer that question.
No, at OU he had so many wide open looks, but I mean he was faster than everybody else on the field.
Right.
But in the NFL, when everybody's just as fast, well, I wouldn't say just as fast, but everybody's a lot quicker and smarter than most Big 12 defenses. And the fact that he has such a small catch radius and without the testing to back up his stock, because he was selling himself on testing. But then he won't even be able to test at his pro day. So you go, how much do you risk on a guy that you're not sure can catch the ball effectively and is coming off of an injury that can kind of impact your speed?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a concern, and I'm surprised I'm proud of you. A lot of times I try not to be the big Iowa homer here. I mean, when they took Josie Jewell last year, I was honest as I could be, but I'm proud of you. What do you think? Just a little quick tidbit. CD Lamb, yay or nay?
Yay.
Okay.
CD. Okay, you're never gonna get me. You're never gonna get me to stop talking about CD. So it's funny because it's like I will pound the table for OU guys, like if they're good players, like Baker. You were never going to get me to shut up about Baker if I was on this podcast last year. But it's like now I'm like with Kyler and Marquise, I'm like, yeah, okay, there are concerns. Yeah, okay, I got issues.
All right, well, speaking about another guy that had a lot of hype coming into the season, and a guy that kind of there's been a lot of differing opinions on it. Again, another slot Z hybrid, a guy that mainly did his work from the slot, but I think he does have some Z ability as well, and tested better than I think some people probably thought he would do. AJ Brown from Ole Miss. I mean, you got a guy with it's really just a unique size and power aspect to his game. 6 foot, so not a massive guy, but 226 pounds with, I mean, the bench press, which was 19 reps, which is really good for wide receiver. Also considering he has a 74th percentile arm length and tested solid, not amazing, 4.49, but again, just a thicker guy, very strong, and one that almost plays like as a flex tight end, so to speak. I mean, just the shorter routes, they work in the intermediate part of the field. And when he gets the ball in his hands, he can carry a guy a few yards and get those first downs. So A.J. Brown, a guy whose stock has fluctuated a bit, but one that I think perhaps overexposure made people not like him as much, but I think there's something there.
Yeah. I'm kind of on the fence with A.J. Brown because I think his pro stock is ultimately determined by where he lands.
Yeah.
Because if you're a team that's asking him to be your number one guy, good luck. If you're going to spend a first round pick on him, that's on you. I wouldn't. My biggest issue is what is his calling card? As if you're going to spend a first, or he's been projected to kind of be a first or second round pick. What's his trump trait? What's that thing that you're going to sell yourself on? He's not, on tape at least, he's not a super awesome route runner like we were talking about with Debo. He was explosive out of his breaks and electric with the ball in his hands. He's not an awesome athlete, and his best trait is amazing hands. This guy catches awesome, extraordinarily. But what's the value in a guy that catches well? Yeah, at Ole Miss, he was force-fed targets in that offense that I hate watching. Every time I have to turn on the tape, I want to just stab my kneecap because it'd be more enjoyable. So I wonder about where he projects at the next level, because he played a lot of slot and intermediate, but he might project best outside. But I think he's just a guy you play him in the open field. You do like how Miami did with Jarvis Landry. You play him a lot of underneath. You basically use him as a glorified slot running back.
Yeah.
What's the value of that per se,
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I don't think the overall athleticism is there. He doesn't look incredibly explosive in the open field before or after the catch, but I do think he displays good savviness after the ball is in his hands, and he has a good feel about getting open. And I think that a Jarvis Landry role makes a lot of sense. I do think that the added bulk that he has on Landry, I'm pretty sure at least, I mean, there's not many 230-pound slot wide receivers in the world, but I think that kind of adds a different uniqueness to his ability. But I agree. Now, is he a first round guy for me? No, no, he's not. But if he's there, the top of round 3, I'm intrigued.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I'm with you. I think you need a plan definitely for what he's going to be on the field. I definitely like his hands. He is a hands catcher, big time. Mm-hmm. He loves to catch away from the body, and he tucks that thing away really well. I do like his ability in the open field to make people miss. He's got a nice stop that just makes a defender go right by him to really kind of spin back to the middle of the field. And I really like his ability to win in the middle of the field because he's not afraid to go and make those tough catches. And so he could be one of those kind of like weird, bigger slot wide receivers because of his fearlessness over the middle that teams would be like, oh my gosh, this guy, our slot corners can't handle this guy. Uh-huh. And he can't keep up with it. Our safeties can't keep up with him. Our linebackers can't keep up with him. So honestly, that's probably where I'd play him and get the ball in the short intermediate area and get him making plays in the open field. That would be my ideal plan for him, which again, I mean, if we're bringing this back to the Broncos, we already got Deshaun Hamilton working in the middle of the field. So I'm not sure of his fit with the Broncos with what we've already got on the team.
Yeah, he's definitely not a burner.
Yeah, and so you're kind of going, I think he's more of the dependable target underneath. He's almost a tight end in the fact that he's your on 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, he's your chain mover. You're going to target him underneath a lot. He's going to make the tough catch over the middle. Boom, it's a first down.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we still got – I've actually taken off a few names here because, like always, we're getting into some guys. I took off Stanley Morgan, Cameron Parker, friend of the show, if you're listening. I'm sorry, my guy. I know he's a good player, but I wouldn't say so much of a burner. I got to talk about some other speed guys. Sorry also to you, AJ. Stanley Morgan, good player, fun player, probably a little bit like Deshaun Hamilton. Got to cut down a little bit of time. So now we're getting into these gadget players. Oh, another one is Alex Wesley from Northern Colorado. Also another guy that could be in play there. But got to talk about some of these more speed guys here because, again, Denver's looking for a burner, and these gadgets, how to utilize them. I guess that's a good topic to start on. How do you utilize a gadget wide receiver in today's NFL, and who are some examples of that? Because some people think about speed. There's just different types of speed. There's different ways to utilize speed, and these are guys that I see having some issues early on with route running, getting open down the field, etc. But if you want a speed element, getting the ball in the hand, running reverses, making linebackers and safeties have to account for them as they run behind the line of scrimmage before the snap and get the ball in space. These are guys that really just stand out to me. So how do you utilize that guy in the NFL? Did I just kind of lay it out there, I guess? And who are some good examples in the NFL currently?
Well, I think if you're going to talk speed in a gadget player, I think your first name, and really the only name that will stand out, is how about how the Chiefs use Tyreek Hill?
He's more than gadget, but yes.
Well, yeah, but in terms of how you use a guy like that, I think last year he was kind of utilized more as they played him a lot at running back, and this year with Patrick Mahomes, he was just catching bombs down the field, no problem. And that's how you have to scheme a guy open to I don't want to say you have to scheme him open a lot. His speed is going to be uncanny with a lot of these guys. Your Andy Isabellas, your Paris Campbells, even if somebody like Marquise Brown, if he was healthy and testing. You use him as a dangerous threat to manage the coverage for other guys. Like a lot of you see with the Chiefs, they have to account for Tyreek Hill's speed, and so when they move Tyreek Hill, they take a defender off of Sammy Watkins or Travis Kelce, or they have to double cover Tyreek Hill. And so I think that value of the gadget players with a lot of speed to burn in today's NFL, if you're a creative offensive coordinator, you can make it work to help take the pressure off of some of your other playmakers.
Yeah, it's kind of something the Patriots have done. Why run the football when you can run through the air? There's a little bit more nuance to that, with guys like Edelman and Welker. But still, those space players, really interesting. And the three I got highlighted here, Andy Isabella from UMass, who had a pretty solid combine, a solid Senior Bowl. I think that maybe some people overhyped him a little bit. The athleticism, he did run a solid 40 with the 4.31, 96th percentile, but some of the other athletic testing was right around the 50th to 60th percentile, but still solid player. We saw at the Senior Bowl too. He made some wicked plays with the ball in his hands after the catch, getting the ball in space. Another guy, Paris Campbell, one of the biggest winners of the combine, an athletic freak tester, and then Mecole Hardman from Georgia. And I'm curious about your thoughts on these three guys overall.
Well, Isabella is going to be the first name that I'm going to highlight here. I'm just going to go in order of the way you mentioned him. I think Isabella probably projects the best to start right away because I think he's a more nuanced route runner than either Hardman or Paris Campbell. Paris Campbell is very raw with a lot of his routes. But, like we were saying, Isabella is super fast, 4.31 speed. He plays a lot faster than that. His Georgia tape was just zoom. He's gone. But he's a lot like Hollywood. He catching the ball in that tough areas. He does well to extend, but he doesn't have the strongest hands in the world. And so you wonder if he's going up against a physical corner or even a nickel with any sort of ball skills. How often is he going to make those catches? So you have to be creative with how you use him. But he has a definite role. Now he's not he's not as nuanced as a lot of his pro comps will. They'll be like, "Oh, he's Julian Edelman all over again." He's not as nuanced as Julian Edelman just because he's short and white. So I wonder how a team. I think he, like you were saying, he has to be landing spot is a big is a big deal for him because he has to be with the creative coach that knows how to maximize his skill set.
For sure. And what would you say is his not red flag, but his standout trait, the thing that he's going to win on at the next level?
Well, I mean, we talked about speed, so I won't get into that, but I think he's a crafty route runner in the fact that a lot of speed guys, they just say, okay, you run straight, especially at a small school. They're going to be like, okay, you just go down the field and we'll throw the ball to you and you're going to catch a touchdown. There's a lot of different routes that he runs with high nuances. He's got great footwork in and out of his breaks, but he doesn't run. He's not super quick through his breaks, but he's explosive and fast through them. So he gets open differently than a lot of just pure speed guys. And I think a team is going to fall in love with that ability to not just be faster than a lot of guys on the field, but he can actually separate with route running as his career goes on.
One thing I'd like to see him do just a little bit more is set up players with different gears. Where, a couple plays, it might look like he's almost taking a play off, but it's more trying to set up a guy for a route a little bit later in the game where he's only getting to second gear instead of third gear. And then all of a sudden, boom, hits that third gear. And he's a Energizer bunny. I mean, the guy's those feet are going crazy.
Yeah.
I had the nickname for cross country. I was called Machine Gun Carl because I'm a short guy. So I always love short receivers. They always have a near and dear place to my heart. But running cross country, I look like a machine gun going off because all these other guys have these huge strides that cover 5 yards at a time. And here I am taking 5 steps to their 1. And I just wish I'd see a little bit more because of those quick feet. He could really turn up gears in a hurry and really set guys up where he kind of gets them to relax just for a second and boom, gone. I just would love to see that because I think that could take his game to that very next level.
Yeah, I can't disagree. And a guy also, I mean, it's crazy how many of these guys in this draft class, you're looking at their draft comparisons and they're related to guys in this class. A guy that has the closest overall athletic skill set, size, whatever, that compares to Andy Isabella, hey, he's in this class. Mecole Hardman, another one, the smaller, 5'10", 190 pounds, which for 5'10" is not bad. And then, not great arm length, not great hand size, etc. But the 40-yard dash, 4.33, I mean, blazing speed, solid bench rep too. It's 72, which I mean, for again, a small guy, the short arms, that definitely helps, but not terrible. And solid vertical jump as well. I mean, again, small guy, 36.5 inches, pretty solid. And even the broad jump, 119, 41st percentile, but he's a smaller guy. So again, Mecole Hardman, I am a little bit concerned just because the volume is pretty low there. And I hate to be the guy comparing him to a guy that played for the same school, but Isaiah McKenzie still has left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. I think he's more physical than Isaiah McKenzie, which is big because Isaiah McKenzie, every time he touched it, it felt like he fumbled it. But I love the speed. I love the compact nature of the speed as well. But again, a gadget guy that needs a lot of work. I was watching some Georgia the other day. I was watching some Jacob Eason and Mecole Hardman making some plays down the field. But again, how much is that as a receiver compared to being a gadget player? Because I feel like all these guys are talking about them as gadgets. Yeah. There's only so much value for a gadget compared to what you can get from that next level of a slot or a Z burner type.
Yeah, and for Hardman, I wrote down that he was almost like a non-injured Marquise Brown, in the fact that he's fast. But I mean, not at that same level that Hollywood is, but in the fact that that you can use him in that same way that you would use Hollywood, and you get him into the open field, and he's going to take it the distance. And you were saying making plays downfield, which at Georgia they passing downfield was a foreign concept. So, but how valuable is his skill set? That's somebody else. That's above my pay grade to decide at the NFL net level.
And speaking of the guy that, honestly, one of the winners of the Combine, probably one of the most athletic testers that we've seen there for a long time. I mean, looking at his spider graph, the bench press wasn't great, but everything else over the 90th percentile, 20-yard shuttle, broad jump, vertical jump, 40-yard dash, all of it great. I mean, these Big Ten guys all really stood out. Iowa, Michigan, and Ohio State. Got to get the Iowa in there, too. All the Iowa guys stood out, which was surprising for me, because Anthony Nelson and Imani Hooker was supposed not to be athletic, but hey, what do you know? Chris Doyle, the strength and conditioning coach, highest paid strength and conditioning coach in the country for a reason, I guess, when it comes down to it. But
there's just something in the corn in Iowa.
That's true. You're on to us. That's how they make good whiskey. 5'11". I mean, good player. I am very curious, though. You were talking about the Ohio State offense earlier. You got Terry McLaurin. You got KJ Hill running these routes down the field. Paris Campbell, for this being this athletic freak, how many plays was he making as a route runner down the field? How many were they that he's the dump off option, the guy that's running this mesh concept in space, and you're getting to the ball to him? Because I'm not seeing almost any nuance in his ability as a receiver.
He is fast, and he's fast, and that's pretty much it.
Yep.
I mean, you can use him as a speed runner down the field, but you're basically only going to tell him, hey, go run down the field that way towards the end zone, and we're going to see if you could take a safety off. He can't catch to save his life either. He fights that thing. You watch him and you're like, he's so fast that I don't think Ohio State really knew what to do with him besides just, hey, we're going to throw a screen out to you and you go take it up the field.
Yeah.
And that's it. And at the NFL level, he won't have a lot of those wide open looks. He's not going to have the clean release off of the line of scrimmage that he was going to enjoy at Ohio State. So I have a difficult time projecting him at the next level because his game is just all speed.
And there's not much nuance in the open field either. It's like, I run past you. He doesn't have like a slipperiness to him.
Yeah. And if he gets hit, he's down. There's not a lot of contact balance when he's in the open field. And so you're going, well, whoop-de-doo. You can run fast. Thanks, bud.
You talked earlier about how much you hated was Ole Miss's offense?
Yeah.
Is that who it was?
Yeah.
For me, Ohio State's offense just drove me crazy. Now, they were smart in they'd find something that would work, and they'd just keep doing it over and over and over again, just daring the other team to stop it. But there's so many times where it was either a screen pass or that quick in or quick slant play to him.
Yep.
And they just have crossers trying to cut off his defender and just get him that little bit of separation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, they're going to do that same play again. Yep, there it goes. And it drove me crazy watching that over and over again because it just seems so stupid. But at the same time, it worked. I mean, they won, but it was just more we have better athletes is what it felt like.
Yes. And so, which was always crazy whenever they played really good teams and they just made mincemeat of them. But I'm going, you guys should be able to keep up with their athletes. There's a difference from going to playing Northwestern to playing Washington and Alabama and teams like that. But with their offense, I mean, at the game against Michigan, how many times did they run mesh?
Oh, that's the only thing they ran.
Yeah. It's so you're going, come on now, y'all. I want to see something a little different. And how much of that impacts the player's development? Like we were saying with McLaurin and Campbell, there's not a lot of nuance in the routes. So is it the scheme that's developing them, or is it just they're not best running those routes for a reason? Ohio State didn't have them running those routes because they're not good at it or something like that,
Yeah, that makes sense. And moving along now from the gadget guys to the pure slots. Sorry we don't have Hunter Renfrow on here, looking for a little bit more speed. Taylor Gabriel's the type that I'm really looking for here, and a guy that's been compared a lot to him from guys at the Draft Network. I've even heard some Broncos scouts mention this name maybe, is Penny Hart from Southern Georgia, and absolute travesty that he was not invited to the Combine. I think he would have had a pretty darn good Combine if he would have been allowed, but Southern Georgia wide receiver and a guy that, man, I think there's a lot to like there and a lot to grow on. And his tape was as frustrating as it was fun because his quarterback this past year, not great.
Was awful. I'm going to correct you. He's from Georgia State.
Georgia State.
But oh my gosh, his quarterback was, but he is at Georgia State. And so the first time I noticed Penny Hart, I highlighted him as a guy to watch this past summer. Last year, it was one of my first articles where I was previewing the wide receiver class, and he came in as one of the small school guys on the bottom of the second part of the article series. He went off against Oregon. I think he was like 9 catches, 150 something yards, and 2 touchdowns as a freshman. And I was like, whoa, who is this kid? And he came into the season, and he kind of fell under the radar because he played for Georgia State. Nobody, he wasn't going to have a lot of buzz. And then when he showed up at the Senior Bowl, I was like, hey, I wrote about this kid. I know who he is. Yeah, I called it. Guys. Look at me. But I think the Taylor Gabriel comps were apt for him because in that short area where you take a bubble screen to him, where you take a slant, he's so dynamic. He's I wouldn't say he's super fast, like explosive, take the top off a defense fast, but he's definitely super quick and dynamic as an athlete, where you can manufacture touches to him in the slot and feel great about him getting you that extra 5, 6, 7, 8 yards because he's going to make a couple guys miss.
Yeah. I think one of the more underrated parts that he brings to the game is that fearlessness. For being a 5'8", 180-pound kid, I mean, he makes some tough catches. And especially, I mean, like I said, his quarterback can't throw it well to him, so he has to make a lot of catches in traffic where if it was on the money, he wouldn't be hit. But I don't know. He does a lot of work over the middle that I'm just very, very impressed with what he does there for being such a small guy. He isn't afraid to, lay it all on the line to make a catch. I don't know. I really like the kid. Mm-hmm. He's a little bit small. That makes me a little bit worried, especially with his style of play. But I think a team will really like what they get out of this kid.
I wonder why he wasn't invited to the combine. Do you guys know anything about that? Like, was there something in his past or anything? Or was
I don't believe there was anything else. I think it was just a guy that for some reason did not get invited. Talk about the depth of the wide receiver class. You get a guy like that left behind.
Yeah. I had a buddy of mine, a coworker, who made a thread talking about Penny Hart, and he said how bad his quarterback was on the thread, and a bunch of Georgia State people jumped him, and he was like, "Okay, yeah, you go right ahead. You think that your quarterback's great?
Tape don't lie."
Yeah.
And the last guy I do want to talk about here before we wrap this up, got a lot of good wide receivers here, but a guy that I believe is the youngest player in the entire eligible draft pool. Could be wrong there. Redshirt sophomore, Greg Dortch from Wake Forest. And I was surprised that he did come out. I do think he was sent home from the combine, actually, because of was there a condition that sent him home? I want to say there was. Did they? 1 second.
Ooh. I didn't hear anything about that, but I mean, don't. Yeah, I was out of town for most of the weekend, so I wasn't really like super paying attention to a lot of the stories. I just kind of saw the numbers flash.
I know he got measured, but I feel like somebody got sent somewhere with a heart condition, so they didn't test.
But he measured awfully. I do remember that. I don't even think Marquise Brown was as small as he was. I think, what was he, like 5'7", 160?
173, actually.
173, okay.
5'7".
Yeah. And that problem kind of shows up on tape because he's athletic and he gets open, but the dude catching the ball, I think he has a little trouble catching it. He double catches and body catches a lot more than I would like. Yeah. And I think he's shifty, and I would say he's athletic, but not a super awesome burner like we were talking about with a couple other guys, like these gadget guys. And so you wonder about, okay, so he's a pretty decent route runner, in my opinion, but he's small. and the hands are a problem. So you just kind of wonder what's his value. And if he got sent home from the combine for a heart injury or a heart concern, excuse me, not injury. Oof,
I don't think he had the heart concern. That must have been somebody else. I'll have to check that out. Somebody was going to test, and there was a medical that came out. But it sounded like after the measurements, he decided not to test. So definitely a concern there.
Oh, why would he not test after measuring that poorly? That's crazy.
Probably, I mean, you don't do that if you're not concerned, I would say. So definitely look out for that. All right, well, out of all these guys here, give me your favorite three. We talked a bunch here. Who are your guys that you're willing to stand for, as a wide receiver guy? Who are the ones that you're looking for, that speed guy who's going to make a big impact, and don't just give me the top three either. The guys that you think are great for their value, where you see them going.
Well, for their value, I think if we're going to talk about value, how about, we were talking about this kid earlier, how about Darius Slayton? Yeah. With almost no hype, you're going to find him in probably the fourth or fifth round. You get a guy like that in the fourth or fifth round, sign me up, and twice of the week, twice on Sundays. I think if you can nab him late or not late, early day 3, that's a very, very awesome selection. And if Marquise Brown continues to fall, I mean, if you can get him in the fourth, that's also not bad value wise. I'm so upset that you got rid of my boy Stanley Morgan.
Our boy Cam would be going crazy. He's a big Nebraska guy, and he keeps hyping Morgan up big time.
Ugh, Nebraska people.
Hey, Nissy, you can stick around.
Yep.
Hey, I'm an OU fan. We got a little bit of bad blood between us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumbler MHH, and myself on Twitter at Nick Kendall MHH. Also, make sure you follow AJ at AJ Draft Scout and check out his work at the Dynasty Football Factory. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliated 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment. Your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl and AJ, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.